Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose. And, I always love stories that goes against the grain. The internet has this tendency of just creating its own narrative at times. And before you know it, this narrative kind of takes a life of its own. We've seen it happen time and time again. And if there's one company within gaming that's constantly battling some kind of controversy, some fair, some not, but I'd say that's probably Xbox. It's always something in the world of Xbox. But we got some new information today that maybe puts one of these stories to rest, or at least temporarily. Now, we also got some major news for the volatile Ubisoft situation. Last week, I mentioned the idea that a merger acquisition could possibly be inbound, and by all indication, that is now officially a reality. But I don't think everybody will necessarily be happy about the potential buyer. But we will get into all of that today. Let's just go and get right into things, though, starting off with a couple of reviews. October continues to look like a very fun month for gaming, as both Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred and Silent Hill 2 reviewed very well. You can see here that Silent Hill 2 has an 87 overall score, making it one of the best reviewed AAA games for 2024. I know a lot of people were originally worried about this game because of Bloober Team's involvement, but according to critics, you can rest easy. This seems to be a great remake, and I've heard various times today that this ranks right up there with the Resident Evil remakes and the job that Capcom has done for that series. So that is high praise and great news considering Silent Hill 2's significance really for the horror genre as a whole. A lot of horror games were directly inspired by Silent Hill 2, and now that it's got this great remake in 2024, a lot of new gamers can now see exactly why it's so beloved. So just big congrats to Bloober Team and Konami here. I love the fact that Konami is coming back in a major way, and I hope that continues on with Metal Gear Solid Delta next year. Now, as for Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred, though, it also got some much-needed praise. I know the Diablo community has been on, I'll just kind of say it's been a roller coaster ride since Diablo 4's initial release. Not every patch has been met with just glowing praise per se, but Vessel of Hatred marks a pivotal moment for Diablo 4, and I'm happy to say that it appears the wait has been well worth it. It currently has an 86 overall score, and it sounds like Blizzard addressed a lot of the criticism that they got this past year. And also, the new story edition sounds fantastically well done. So here's to hopefully a great year for Diablo 4 with its newest expansion, Vessel of Hatred. Now, speaking of Konami just a moment ago, they gave us another update for Metal Gear Solid Delta, and I think this one specifically is quite fascinating because it does kind of illustrate how a simple change can completely transform a game far beyond what you might initially realize. And that's something that Konami has had to work around. If you look at the gameplay, you'll notice that there is a new camera angle to fit what gamers might expect from modern games. The only problem with this, though, is that it kind of breaks the game in the sense that the original was not designed with this camera angle in mind. Having this more direct line of sight makes Delta much easier than intended, and that's something that Konami has had to address in a very unique way. You can see here, Corcado spoke about how Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake was supposed to have a feature that allowed players to switch camera modes whenever they wanted, but decided against that in the end. He explained that the difficulty level changes depending on players' viewpoint, hence that decision was scrapped. Having a wider linear view and the ability to shoot your gun when moving Snake reduces the new style's difficulty. However, if the difficulties for new style and legacy style were matched in Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake, the latter would become too difficult. Therefore, the developers decided to split these two modes. So in other words, you will have the option for both camera perspectives, but you can't change them on a given save file. You will have to completely restart the game. That's because they had to balance the new playstyle differently to kind of match the difficulty that you would expect to see in its legacy mode. So enemy locations and things like that are probably a little bit different in its new mode to address it being surprisingly too easy. And that tells me two different things. Not only does this tell me that Konami is going about this remake with actual care, which is great to see, but in a way, Delta, if you think about it, also includes two different games in one. It's legacy mode, if you prefer the original game, just with a fresh new coat of paint, or a completely new version with a more modern camera angle. So, I mean, Delta just continues to sound incredible, but let me know which version you would rather play. Do you want to play in its legacy mode or its new style mode instead? All right, so let's go talk about this Xbox story because this is something that we frequently hear about, and that's this idea that Japanese games just don't sell on the Xbox platform. Now, I'm very much in the mindset that they don't sell quite as well as they do on other platforms, nor do I think that they should be expected to. Obviously, Nintendo and PlayStation are much bigger in Japan, and they also have bigger install bases worldwide. So by all means, they should absolutely 100% put up better numbers than they do on Xbox. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Japanese developers can't also have success on Xbox. By releasing your games on Xbox, that's really only going to increase your sales even more. And this idea that Xbox gamers just hate Japanese games and they just don't buy them, I don't think that's true. And the newly released Final Fantasy Pixel remasters are kind of proving that. Here you have one of the most beloved collections ever made, and they released on other platforms a year and a half ago. Yet here we are in late 2024, and they're finally available on Xbox. Now, despite it being so much later, this collection is still finding success on Xbox. You can see here posted up on Windows Central, they said, demand for this grand compilation of classic Final Fantasy games has shown to be very high as a week after it launched on Xbox platforms. The Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster Collection has been seen rising up to the 12th spot on the top paid list on the Xbox Store in the United States, as cited on Reddit via Hazador Gaming at X. We at Windows Central also checked the game's position on the Xbox Store in other countries. While the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster Collection only holds the 20th spot in the UK, it has hit a high 13th spot in the Xbox stores in Germany and has been riding high in other countries we've been able to check as well. So, by all indication, the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster Collection is performing very well on Xbox, and I'd say far better than a lot of people assumed that it would. This really kind of goes against the narrative that Xbox gamers just hate JRPGs. And in fact, this kind of speaks to why Xbox is still, yes, an important platform for this genre. Now, I assume most of the people who are buying this collection on Xbox are mainly Xbox-only gamers. And the reason I say that is because anybody who has multiple platforms probably more than likely bought it somewhere else already. Yet it's still selling well on Xbox, which I think kind of says a lot about the situation. I think this story also comes at an interesting time, though, just because one big story that's been making the rounds these past few weeks is that Metaphor Refantasio might be in trouble because Xbox owns its marketing deal. Again, this idea that Xbox gamers just don't care about JRPGs, apparently this means it's a death sentence for Refantasio, which I don't agree with at all. Now, admittedly, Refantasio hasn't gotten a lot of buzz online, but I don't think that that's necessarily because of Xbox's marketing deal. Rather, I think it's because it's technically a new IP, and gamers are still waiting to see if the hype is actually worth it. In my opinion, I think that if it reviews well, that's when the community will truly embrace it, and then the word of mouth will kind of spread across all platforms. In fact, Xbox has had a marketing deal for multiple Japanese games this generation, and interestingly enough, they've performed very well. If you look at something like Yakuza Like a Dragon, that was initially an Xbox Series exclusive when it first released. It came to the PS5 like 6 months later, and guess what? It was very successful. They also had the marketing rights for Tales of Arise. And not only was Tales of Arise a big-time success, but it's actually the best selling entry for the entire franchise. Doesn't exactly sound like Xbox killed that game. Now, Xbox has also had the marketing rights for Persona 3 Reload just earlier this year and Persona 5 Tactica, which again, they performed well. So, this idea that Xbox is to blame for Refantasio's lack of pre-release hype, I think is not only being overblown, but I also think that it just simply doesn't ring true at all. Again, I think it's more because gamers are a little bit more hesitant when it comes to new IP. If it reviews well, though, which we're going to see here soon enough, then I'm fairly positive that will quickly change, especially considering its connection with the Persona series. I think a lot more people will then talk about it. For the time being, though, if you know that Refantasio exists, well, Xbox has kind of done their job in that sense. Now it's really just kind of up to Atlus and whether or not they make a good game. Okay, now we also have some major Ubisoft news that could completely shift the AAA gaming space. We've talked a lot about Ubisoft's struggles this past year. Skulls and Bones completely flopped. You have Star Wars Outlaws, that underperformed, and so far, the reception for Assassin's Creed Shadows has been largely negative to the point that Ubisoft decided to delay it. So, I mean, these are three massive blows to Ubisoft's bottom line. Their only mild success this year was Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which, hey, I thought that was a great game. But it's also not necessarily the type of game that's going to keep a publisher going that has 20,000 employees. They need their big AAA games to succeed, and right now, they're not even close to success. And that's why their stock continues to plummet. I mean, I said it as soon as they announced the Shadows delay. I think they're potentially done, and there's a good chance that a buyout could be on the horizon. Well, today, that has now become a reality because we got a new report from Bloomberg, and you can just read it here. It says, Tencent and Ubisoft's founding Guillemot family are considering options including a potential buyout of the French video game developer after it lost more than half of its market value this year, according to people familiar with the matter. The Chinese tech company and the Guillemot brothers have been speaking with advisors to help explore ways to stabilize Ubisoft and bolster its value, the people said, asked not to be identified discussing a private matter. One of the possibilities being discussed would involve teaming up to take the company private, according to the people. So here's the thing. A lot of people are concerned about Tencent being a potential buyer for Ubisoft. Tencent is already a massive gaming company as is, and this could potentially make them a lot bigger with some very important franchises, which includes Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, Far Cry, Rayman, Splinter Cell, and the list just kind of goes on and on and on. But this is the position that Ubisoft has put themselves in. You know, AAA games cost a lot of money to make, especially when you have nearly 20,000 employees. And you can't have consecutive games underperform the way they have. So there's really not a lot of options they currently have. Now, it does sound like a partnership with Tencent could make them a private company, if anything else. But I think no matter what, this will be devastating for Ubisoft's workforce. With or without an acquisition, nearly 20,000 employees with multiple flops in a row is something that will likely be addressed in due time. So it does seem like Ubisoft is scrambling to save the company, and yeah, that might mean pairing up with Tencent. Now, this will give them some protection, but I think no matter what, Ubisoft has to start delivering on better game experiences than what they've given us this past year. This is just not sustainable, and that's why we're talking about a Tencent acquisition today. Let me know what you all think about this situation, though. Do you fear it, or are you okay with a Ubisoft-Tencent merger? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but as always, hit that subscribe button, and until next time, peace out.